My next guest is the perfect person to be discussing those with. He's Glenn Greenwald, and he's the host of Rumble's System Update. He won a Pulitzer Prize in 2014, which we mention every time he comes on. Well, we don't always mention what it was for. It was his reporting at The Guardian at the time, based on the documents that were provided to him by Edward Snowden, whose name was mentioned non-stop at the Gabbard hearing today. Glenn, that must have been surreal for you. I mean, you knew it was coming, but I mean, if you had walked into the room and offered to testify at that moment, they would have said yes in a heartbeat to cross-examine you like they did with Tulsi. Let me play a little sound before we get into it, and I'll kick it off with, okay, I'm going to do 3 sound bites, okay, and I'm going to set it up, and then you're going to take it on Snowden, but I want to give the audience a feel. Here, first is a Democrat. He was the one who first started it, Senator Angus King, Democrat of Maine. His was rather gentle. Here's how it went.
The first item, Edward Snowden perpetrated the largest and most damaging public release of classified information in U.S. intelligence history. Snowden caused tremendous damage to national security, and the vast majority of the documents he stole have nothing to do with programs impacting individual privacy. But you don't recall ever seeing the work of that committee.
I'm aware of those conclusions drawn. Edward Snowden.
Were you aware at the time?
Yes, I was, Senator. Edward Snowden broke the law. There's no question about that. He should not have released all of that information that caused that harm.
So he broke the law, but it wasn't all that serious? Is that what you thought in 2020?
I take very seriously upholding our Constitution. Confirmed as Director of National Intelligence, I would take seriously the responsibility to protect our nation's secrets, just as I have for almost 20 years of holding a security clearance of some sort myself.
All right, I lied. I'm going to show you 2 sound bites because they're too long. That was a Democrat. Now here's Republican James Lankford of Oklahoma trying to dig down on Snowden too.
Was Edward Snowden a traitor?
Senator, my heart is with my commitment to our Constitution and our nation's security.
Ours too.
Thank you. Yeah. I have shown throughout my almost 22 years of service in the military, as well as my time in Congress, how seriously I take the privilege of having access to classified information.
Was he a traitor at the time when he took America's secrets, released them in public, and then ran to China and became a Russian citizen?
Senator, I'm focused on the future and how we can prevent something like this from happening again.
Well, they didn't stop there, Glenn. As you know, I guess I will play it, forgive me. I just want to set it up properly. Michael Bennet, he's a Democrat from Colorado, went all in and was not happy that she would not sign on to the T word, traitor. Watch.
Was Edward Snowden a traitor to the United States of America?
Senator, I will also repeat my answer. He broke the law.
You said.
Senator, if confirmed as Director of National Intelligence, I will work with you to make sure that there is not another Snowden-like leak.
Media. It's not a moment to propagate theories, conspiracy theories, or attacks on journalism in the United States. This is when you need to answer the questions of the people whose votes you're asking for. As my colleague said, this is not about you. It's about the people that serve the intelligence agencies of the United States. Is Edward Snowden a traitor to the United States of America? That is not a hard question to answer when the stakes are this high.
Senator, as someone who has
your
served
answer,
in
yes
uniform,
or no, is Edward Snowden a traitor to the United States of America?
As someone who has worn our uniform
questions.
in combat, I understand how critical our national security is.
Apparently you don't.
Okay, Glenn. Having set it all up, your thoughts?
Obviously, the question of what Edward Snowden did, whether he did everything exactly the way people think he should have, is a point that can be debated, has been debated for a long time. One thing I will note is that at the time of the reporting, there was a lot of support both from the left and the right, the kind of anti-establishment populist wings of both parties. I remember it very well. And it was the centrist bipartisan establishment wing that was enraged by what Edward Snowden did, because what he did, I think we have to remember, is in this question of whether he's a traitor, let's remember that, like Tulsi Gabbard, Edward Snowden, after 9/11, went to enlist in the United States Army. He heeded his government's call to go to war to defend his country. He then went to work for the CIA and the NSA, and only there did he discover that the NSA was doing things that it was never supposed to be doing, namely turning its very powerful surveillance tools onto its own citizenry. It was always supposed to be directed outward and spying on Americans without warrants in ways that Obama's national security DNI, his chief intelligence officer, James Clapper, falsely denied to Congress that they were doing. And he felt duty bound to come forward and let his fellow citizens know. And some of the programs we were able to reveal as a result of what he did ended up being declared both unconstitutional and illegal. And none of the people on this committee are angry about that. They're only angry at him for having exposed it, because these people on this committee have supreme loyalty to the part of our government that's secret and that has been abusing its power, which is why President Trump picked her to go in and confront that. The other thing I want to say, Megyn, this idea of who's a traitor or not, being a traitor means you tried to betray your country, you tried to harm your country and help your enemies. Edward Snowden had this archive of information that he was entitled to have. He had classified top secret security clearance. Think of all the things he could have done with that archive. He could have sold it to some foreign government or some group of non-state actors that made a huge amount of money. He could have passed it secretly to America's enemies. He could have dumped it all on the internet without regard to what it was exposing. He did none of that. He came to American journalists, myself, who was working at The Guardian, Laura Poitras, who was working with The Washington Post, and he said, I only want you to reveal what is necessary to reveal that's in the public interest for Americans to know. And all the decisions that were made about what got released and what weren't were decisions that we as journalists made. He played no role in deciding what was released and what wasn't. And the vast majority of the archive to this very day was never released because we acted in accordance with his very conservative views about how the archive should be treated. So again, you can dispute things he did, say he should have done things in a different path. But the idea that he was a traitor when he could have done so many things to harm the United States and everything he did was about protecting the privacy rights of American citizens as guaranteed by the Constitution that courts said were being violated, that's why Tulsi defended him. Not because she believed everything he did was perfect, but because she knew that he was the only person with the courage to come forward and risk his liberty and risk his life, which he did in a very courageous way, simply to let American citizens know what their government was doing to them in the dark. And I think this kind of histrionics about demanding that she call him a traitor is ridiculous. And the one last point I wanted to make, Megyn, quickly, if I could, I know Tulsi, I have a lot of respect for her, even though I disagree with her on things. I was just talking to your team about this. If you look at those clips you just showed, Tulsi knew so well that if she had just called him a traitor, her path to confirmation would have been much clearer. But she doesn't think he's a traitor, so she refused to do that because she's not willing to say things she doesn't believe in order to advance her own career or gain power, which speaks extremely well of her character.
I actually was thinking about that because I feel like if you'd been out there, you would say, no, he's not a traitor, and let me explain why. Why do you think because she just knew she'd be losing too many Republican votes in particular if she was just forthright?
Yeah, I mean, and maybe even Democrats. I mean, probably Republicans, though. If she had said no, that she does not think he's a traitor, her confirmation possibilities would be over. They're already at risk, but it would have been over. And so you could say, yeah, she should just do it on principle and go down with the fight, and then they'll just put somebody in that seat after her who says, yeah, Snowden's a traitor, he should be murdered, the government did nothing wrong, the CIA did nothing wrong, or the NSA. What's the victory in that? But the fact that she wouldn't affirm false claims, I think, is what made what she did so admirable. I wish she had said no, but if she had said no, her nomination would have been destroyed.
So it was striking to me to see how much time was spent on that. Granted, I was only there for about an hour and 15 minutes of the whole thing, but almost that entire time was spent on Snowden. I was thinking I'd be drunk if we were playing the Snowden drinking game, Glenn. And then swoops in, right before I left, Senator Ted Young, Republican from Indiana, who is a critical vote. And I don't feel good about him voting yes on Tulsi. I could be wrong. It could be like a Cassidy situation with RFKJ where like he played it in a way that confused me at the hearing and he winds up voting yes. I don't know whether Cassidy's going to vote yes, but I didn't feel so good about Ted Young, and I know a lot of eyes are on him. He also brought up the Snowden stuff, and here's how that went.
Was Edward Snowden false to an obligation or false to a duty?
I don't understand what you're saying. False?
Yes. Did he betray a duty? But did he betray the trust of the American people? Which is, according to Merriam-Webster, that's the definition of a traitor.
Edward Snowden broke the law, and he released this information in a way that he should not have. He also acknowledged and exposed information that was unconstitutional, which drove a lot of the reforms that this body has made over the years to make sure that Americans' constitutional rights are protected.
Well, for what it's worth, Mr. Snowden is watching these proceedings. He's posted on social media even, indicating that Tulsi Gabbard should indicate that I harmed national security. This may be the rare instance in which I agree with Mr. Snowden.
What are your thoughts on that one, Glenn?
Okay, first of all, go and look at that tweet just to get an understanding for how politicians so readily lie. The tweet was saying, look, if Tulsi Gabbard needs to say that I harm national security and the sweet feelings of people in Washington, have her go say it. I know it's the Pledge of Allegiance you're required to take in Washington. He wasn't saying, oh, I'm here to finally confess that I harm national security. And yet that's the claim that was, and I have to say, there's so many claims that get made about Snowden. I know we don't have time to go into them. I just did a segment on it last night about how he ended up in Russia. He didn't choose to go there. He was trying to pass through there. The Obama administration trapped him there, all the things that are used against him. But be that as it may, I think the key point here is that when Donald Trump ran in 2016 and when he ran again, he did not run against the Democratic Party. He ran against the establishment wings of both parties, what he called the swamp. People who believe that these institutions should never be reformed, that they never err, they're there to protect the status quo, they don't want Washington changed. Trump ran on a promise telling the American people what they already believe, which is that these institutions are fundamentally broken, that he wants to go in and radically restructure them, rebuild them, and make them work how they're supposed to work in the interest of the American people and not against them. And the nominees he sent there are people who shared that commitment, at least the ones that are controversial, to change these institutions that haven't been working. And I think it's important to realize that there are a lot of people in Congress, Senate, Republicans and Democrats, who are very much have that pro-establishment ethos. And even though they have to praise Trump and pretend they're on his side, they very much are there to subvert and impede what he does.
We continue to face uncertainty when it comes to the economy, with a perfect storm brewing as Social Security and Medicare hit a breaking point as the largest generation is hitting retirement. A smaller workforce means a smaller tax base. You pair that with our growing national debt and the rising cost of living, and we could have a very big problem on our hands. So what are you doing right now to protect your family for the future? Gold can be a very safe haven in very hard economic times, and Birch Gold makes it easy to diversify a portion of your savings into physical gold. Birch Gold will help you transition an existing IRA or 401k in whole or in part into an IRA in gold. And it won't cost you one penny, not one out of pocket. Protect your future today. Text MK to 989898 and get your free info kit on gold and a copy of The Ultimate Guide for Gold in the Trump Era with a foreword by Donald Trump Jr. There's no obligation, just information. Birch Gold has earned the trust of countless Americans looking to safeguard their savings. Text my initials, MK, to the number 989898 today. Thanks so much for watching. If you like what you just saw, hit the subscribe button for more clips and full episodes.